Order.
Pedicabs London Bill, Lords.
May I remind members that in committee, members should not address the Chair as Deputy Speaker. Please use our names when addressing the Chair. Chair, Madam Chairman, Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman are all acceptable. We begin with Amendment 9 to Clause 1, with which it will be convenient to consider the amendments, clauses stand part, and new clauses on the selection paper. Sir Christopher Chope.
Sir Roger, may I move Amendment number 9 in my name and also speak to Amendments 1, 2, 4, 12, 17, 14, 15, 18, 3, 19, 10, 11, 5, 16 and 13, which are also in my name. And in moving Amendment 9, can I begin by putting on record my appreciation of the very positive way in which my honourable friend the Minister has engaged in deliberations on this bill. As discussed at second reading, the differences of opinion about the bill centre around whether the consequence will be deliberately or otherwise to legislate pedicabs out of existence. Pedicabs are to London what gondolas are to Venice, an essential part of the colour and vibrancy of our capital city. And the Evening Standard has warned recently of the damage being done to the nightlife economy and the nighttime economy in London. And pedicabs are an essential part of that economy. And so I'm sure we wouldn't want to do anything which is going to further undermine the viability of that nighttime economy. Is this bill then the equivalent of a morphine syringe driver to kill off pedicabs? Or is it a necessary protector of responsible pedicab operators? Both I and I think the Minister want it to be the latter. And so does Cycling UK, which has a membership of some 70,000 cyclists, quite a large organisation, Sir Roger, as well as the Pedicab Operators Association. At second reading, I expressed my concerns about over-regulation, as did indeed my right honourable friend for Gainsborough, who said at column 375, he asked the Minister for an assurance that, and I quote, when this regulation comes into force, it will be light touch and not onerous, so that we do not kill this young and perfectly acceptable industry. And my honourable friend the Minister replied, the answer is yes and yes. And that response, a clear, unambiguous response, is extremely welcome. So it's important that we are able to ensure that we deliver on that commitment. And the question often arises, can we trust Transport for London? And those of us who live in London during the week and others who are resident in London throughout the year are quite concerned about the failure of Transport for London to listen on issues such as the extension of ULEZ and the proliferation of 20-mile-an-hour zones. Transport for London produced an outline of how they would use the process of regulation which they would be given under this bill, and they set out that outline in January 2022. That was updated in February this year, and the Minister made arrangements for that draft to be circulated to all interested members. Unfortunately, and I know this was not his fault, that draft was not circulated with the letter which he sent, but only late on Thursday. Sir Roger, ironically, just about half an hour after the House had risen and the deadline for tabling amendments for today had passed. So, I will in a minute. So my amendments take no account of that document, and indeed if I'd seen the document in advance before the deadline for tabling amendments had passed, I might well have tabled some additional amendments. Of course I could wait to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I accept the point that he makes that there was an issue with the providing of the TfL regulations until Thursday, but he may recall that he was involved in meetings with me and TfL when I was having a private members bill back in 2021 and 2022, and he was actually sent the same regulations, draft regulations, by my office on January the 20th, 2022 by email. So he has had a couple of years to read, and they are the exact regulations. I don't believe they've been changed.
Well, I hear what my honourable friend says, but they have been changed. The regulations that have been, the draft regulations that have been produced take into account the discussions that there were on this bill in the other place. And they exist, as my honourable friend has confirmed, they existed as a document in 2022. And yet, when I asked that those draft regulations should be made available, and I put down a parliamentary question to my honourable friend about that, I was told that they weren't available. So it's important that regulations, draft regulations, are shared with all legislators and not the subject of some sort of a private meeting. But going to the substance of this, my honourable friend, I'm sure, is as eager as anybody to ensure that the intentions of Transport for London are explored so that we can be sure that they are genuine in wanting to retain the benefits of having a lively and vibrant pedicab industry within London. And I will come on in a moment to some of the content of what we've now seen in the potential licensing framework for pedicabs in London, which is what it's called, because I don't think that will excite much support from people who are keen to defend the interests of genuine pedicab operators. Certainly, one of the issues, Sir Roger, is the issue of the ability of pedicabs in London to lawfully ply for hire. I think it's most people, when they think about pedicabs, they're thinking about being able to hire a pedicab, and the pedicab being available in London, stationary at the side of the street, and you can go and ask the driver if you can have a ride. And I'm not aware of any statement from the government suggesting that they do not believe that pedicabs should not be lawfully available for plying for hire. Yet, when one looks at the regulations, the draft regulations, one can see that Transport for London is raising the issue as to whether or not pedicabs should continue to be able to lawfully apply for hire. And another example of concern is that there is currently no regulation of fares for private hire vehicles, and I think for good reason, and it's set out in that document, Sir Roger. It says that the reason we don't have to regulate the fares of private hire vehicles is because they are subject to a lot of competition. Yes, I will. I just finish this point. And yet the regulations of the draft regulations suggest that Transport for London would wish to regulate the fares of pedicabs even when those pedicabs are being used essentially for private hire. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and very grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. Would he acknowledge that previously in the debate on the bill there was a great deal of concern raised by a number of honourable members from across the House about the conduct of some drivers of pedicabs and the level of fees that were sometimes levied on passengers, some of whom were tourists and who were unaware of the nature of the business they were getting into. And in fact, I think the honourable lady for the the City of Westminster and the City of London, in fact, raised this herself in the previous debate.
I accept, but those concerns, I think, relate to the use of pedicabs when they're applying for hire and people finding themselves getting into the pedicab and then colloquially being ripped off. There should be a regulation of fares in those circumstances. I don't disagree with the honourable gentleman about that. But what I'm saying is that where the pedicab is a private hire vehicle, in other words, there's been an agreement prior to it being hired, the terms and conditions of that agreement will be a contractual arrangement between the hirer and the pedicab operator. That's exactly equivalent to what happens in the private vehicle hire sector at the moment, which is where there is no regulation of the price or the fare. And what I don't understand is why Transport for London is seeking powers to regulate the fare in relation to pedicabs, even when that is a private hire arrangement rather than the subject of something being a hire arrangement made on the street. And so referring to page 5 of the potential licensing framework for pedicabs in London, there's a reference there. It says, TfL would seek to introduce controls on fares for pedicabs, ... including fares for pre-booked journeys. And that is completely inconsistent with the point which they make in the previous paragraph, which says TfL does not regulate fares for private hire vehicles. As private hire vehicles are pre-booked, passengers are in a position to make a consumer choice before hiring the vehicle. Private hire vehicles are thus set by the operators in a competitive market, which allows price to be one of the factors passengers take into account when choosing which operator to book with. So why is it that Transport for London is seeking to introduce controls over fares for pre-booked journeys? And then the next thing, the next issue, which I think is of concern, is whether, and this is not being really resolved, is will pedicabs be able to charge per passenger? At the moment, Sir Roger, you will know that taxis cannot charge per passenger, it's per journey. And one can understand why. The taxi is licensed for 5 seats or whatever, and it doesn't really make much difference to the speed of that vehicle as to how many people are in it as passengers. I would submit that the situation in relation to pedicabs is significantly different, because 4 passengers in a pedicab need a lot more cycling effort from one person than one passenger. And therefore it is surely reasonable that pedicabs should be able to charge per passenger rather than just per journey, irrespective of how many passengers are there. And alarmingly, within this document to which I've been referring, there's a reference to the possibility that Transport for London might require pedicab operators to accept any fare that was offered. So the duty to pick up if a group of people got together and said, you've got 4 seats in your pedicab, we wish to take all 4 seats and require you to take us to Leicester Square or wherever, that pedicab driver would be required to accept those 4 people who might be very heavy, and despite the fact in normal circumstances he'd only wish to have 1 or 2 people in his pedicab because he was not of sufficient fitness to be able to manage to transport those people, Sir Roger, in his pedicab. So those are further examples of concerns which I have got about what is actually contained within these draft regulations. And the cycling fraternity are very worried about pedicabs being legislated out of existence. And that's why they have argued that there should be a regime for pedicabs which is national rather than limited to London, and that it shouldn't be basically an extension of the rules relating to taxis and private hire vehicles. And I put down a question to my honourable friend following his very helpful intervention during the second reading debate, when he referred to the fact that on the issue of licensing authorities across the rest of the country, he referred to paragraph 8.3 of his department's publication entitled Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Licensing Best Practice Guidance for Licensing Authorities in England, which was updated on the 17th of November. And in that update, the department advised that these licensing authorities should make appropriate adjustments to take into account of the demand for pedicab services in their particular area. And during the earlier debates, we'd heard that some such areas include Oxford, Salisbury, Bristol and Cambridge. So I put down a question to the Secretary of State asking for the information which his department holds on the number of pedicabs outside Greater London that are licensed A as taxis and 2 as private hire vehicles, and the number and proportion of those pedicabs that are in Oxford, Salisbury, Bristol and Cambridge. And if he will make an assessment of the potential impact on the number of licensed pedicabs of paragraph 8.3 of the department's guidance entitled Taxi and Private Hire Licensing Best Practice Guidance for Licensing Authorities in England. And the answer which I received from the Minister on the 25th of March, I think one could fairly say rather ducked the question, because he said outside London pedicabs can be licensed as taxis. They cannot be licensed as private hire vehicles, as legislation defines a private hire vehicle as a motor vehicle. Then it says the Department for Transport issues guidance on licensing taxis and private hire vehicles to authorities who should consider the recommendations made and their obligation under the Regulators Code to carry out their activities in a way that supports those they regulate to comply and grow. The best practice sets out that where there is a local interest, licensing authorities should make those appropriate adjustments. Subject to the legal requirements, it's for the licensing authorities to consider. But what the Minister didn't say was what impact, if any, the change in the best practice guidance that he'd issued has had in terms of the impact upon pedicab operators or being able to start pedicab operations outside London. And the answer, Sir Roger, so far as one can gather, is that outside London there are no licensed pedicab operations because, despite the government's apparent best intentions, those who wish to operate pedicabs outside London using the taxi regulations and the private hire vehicle regulations, they are unable to get their operations off the ground, largely because of the regulatory burdens and the costs associated, apart from anything else, with insurance. And so those people who believe, like I do, that pedicabs are actually a highly environmentally advantageous means of transport, because the pedicab driver is taking good exercise in cycling his pedicab, and it is not causing any emissions of any sort, and it is a means of enabling people to get from one part of London to another, but also to have an enjoyable experience. In the same way, Sir Roger, as I don't think many people in Venice use gondolas as a means of getting from A to B quickly. Pedicabs are not, I think, used essentially as a means as an alternative to getting on a bus or the underground. They are there for a bit of fun and recreation. And why would this Conservative government want to be legislating them out of existence? Well, I don't think it does want to legislate them out of existence, which is why I have put down a series of amendments which are designed to try and tighten up the regime about which this bill is concerned. And the amendments are, looking at the bill itself, my first amendment would be to require the Transport for London to have regard to any guidance issued by the Secretary of State in relation to the making of pedicab regulations and exercising its functions under those regulations. And that makes the point that the making of the regulations is what is important here, rather than the exercising of the functions under them. And that would require Transport for London to have regard to that. But it would also, linking it in with my Amendment 19, it would actually ensure that the government produced that guidance within 6 months of the bill receiving royal assent. And the reason for that is because without putting that provision in as well, we could have a situation which the government is required under the law to produce regulations, but there's no time limit on it. And I can remember as an example of how time lapses, Sir Roger, that it was, I think, just over 5 years ago exactly in this chamber, on a Friday, when our Right Honourable friend, the member for East Yorkshire, was bringing forward his bill to control bad behaviour by rogue parking operators and the abuse that they have at the behest of the transport organisations, and are able to get access to driver and vehicle details and then impose severe penalties on miscreants or alleged miscreants who have parked on private property and are then subject to enormous fines. There was going to be a code of practice drawn up. The government assured us that the code of practice would be drawn up. I put forward an amendment saying that there should be a specified period within which that code of practice was drawn up. I was assured by the then minister on the front bench, who was none other than the person who is now our Prime Minister, Sir Roger, that it was unnecessary to do that. 5 years later, that code of practice has still not been produced, to the frustration of motorists up and down the country. So that is why we need to include an amendment which puts a specific time scale upon the time within which the government must produce its guidance. And if that time scale is, as my amendment suggests, 6 months, then it would enable Transport for London to be able to introduce its regulations thereafter. And those regulations would have to take into account what the government had put in its guidance. At the moment, as you will know, Sir Roger, clause 7 of the bill is purely permissive. It permits the government to issue guidance. It doesn't require the government to issue guidance to Transport for London. And for the reasons I set out earlier, I think it is essential that the government does issue guidance to Transport for London, and in particular ensures that Transport for London realises that it is not going to be allowed by the government to prevent the plying for hire of pedicabs in London. It's not going to allow pedicab operators to be required to put a maximum 4 heavy people in their cab and not get any extra fee for the transport of those people, and it's going to not require the other provisions which are potentially very damaging and contained within the draft regulations. Sir Roger, the next amendments that I have got relate to the issue of a consultation. And my amendment number 1 would require that Transport for London should carry out a public consultation, including details of the proposed licensing framework. Well, I'm pleased to say that I think it's clear from the document that's been produced that Transport for London is intent on doing that, and so I wouldn't press that amendment. But I do think we need to be more specific about those people with whom that consultation should be carried out, and that's why my amendment 2 would say that the consultation must include consultation with the London Pedicab Operators Association, Cycling UK, and whoever else. Because at the moment, in the current drafting of it, it just says, before making pedicab regulations, Transport for London must consult whoever it considers appropriate. So vague. Why does it need to be so vague? Why can't it be much more specific? And I was pleased to see that the Honourable Lady for Richmond, who is not in her place, but who's put down an amendment, that she seemed to have the same concerns as I do, and she was seeking to spell it out in a slightly different way, but her Amendment 21 reflects, I think, our joint concern. And then Amendment number 4 provides that Transport for London shall not make provision for regulating pedicabs in public places in Greater London until the Secretary of State has issued his guidance under the provisions of Section 7. And as I've referred to, if we have the requirement that the Secretary of State issues that guidance within 6 months, then I think that point is covered off as well. And then another issue which has been raised by the Pedicab Operators Association and by Cycling UK is the issue of where these pedicabs are going to be able to stand, because we have taxi ranks, and if we're going to be able to have a properly functioning pedicab regime within central London, there needs to be some provision for the designation of places where the pedicabs may stand for hire. And that's a point that's I've made in Amendment number 12, which is that require that the regulations to make provision for the designation of by traffic authorities of pedicab stands. And Sir Roger, we are in a situation when we walk around London these days, one finds that quite often the pavements are littered with bikes, many of which have fallen over, some of which are still on their stands, but they obstruct the pavement, and there doesn't seem to be any effective regulation of those. And it would be ironic if Transport for London was to somehow single out pedicab operators as not being able to have anywhere where they could put their pedicab and rest a while whilst applying for hire, when so the users of what I still call Boris bikes seem to be able to just dump their bike wherever it suits them in London and cause obstruction to the highway and to the pavement. My amendment number 17 ensures that the offences created by the pedicab regulations only apply when the pedicab is being used to carry passengers, when travelling to or from carrying passengers, or when plying for hire. The reason for this, Sir Roger, is because there's a concern expressed that many pedicabs are used for the transport of goods, and that's obviously a very environmentally friendly means of transporting goods around London. And if the regulations are designed to protect passengers and the safety and security of passengers, then we don't want to have a situation where the pedicab driver who's just carrying goods finds himself being subject to the same offences, potential offences, as those who are carrying, those pedicabs that are carrying passengers.
Would you give round that point?
Of course I will.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way on that point. And I think it's important to note that an organisation who does carry out freight deliveries via pedicabs, called PedalMe, has always been very supportive of this bill, because they firmly believe that there should be regulations and that the whole of the industry should be properly regulated. They already ensure that their drivers are properly checked and safe, that their vehicles undergo proper security and safety checks on a regular basis. And therefore I think it is an important point to make that parts of the industry are already very supportive of this bill, and particularly those that carry freight via pedicabs.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for making that point, because it's a similar point to the Pedicab Operators Association. They have been campaigning for 20 plus years to have a proper regulation of pedicabs so that they can carry out their business in a lawful and responsible way and are not plagued by the rogue operators. So it's not it's good to hear that that organisation to which my honourable friend referred is of a like mind, and indeed I think there is nobody across this house who is against the idea of having some regulation of pedicabs. The difference is as to whether we want to introduce safeguards which will prevent those regulations being so stringent that they regulate pedicabs out of existence. And my honourable friend, when we had that discussion to which he was referring earlier, unfortunately was unable to commit to including provisions within her bill at that stage, which would have set this out in clear language on the face of the bill. And I suspect that was because we know that one of the organisations which would like to legislate pedicabs out of existence is the London Taxi Drivers Association, and perfectly understandable. It's much easier for them if they have fewer competitors on the streets. But I think we owe it to the people who have transformed transport for people in the centre of London, particularly during the late evenings and past midnight, that they have been able to introduce this alternative, namely the provision of pedicabs. And then clause 50, Amendment 15, Sir Roger, talks about the need to ensure that the powers to immobilise and seize pedicabs are assigned to police constables in uniform or to traffic officers duly authorised by local authorities, and that they are proportionate to the powers to immobilise and seize motor vehicles in Section 59 of the Police Reform Act 2002. I would hope that that was a no-brainer, and that the Minister, in responding to this debate, will be able to give an assurance that that is exactly what will happen in practice. But at the moment, it is not clear on the face of the regulations that that is what Transport for London have in mind. And they seem to be very keen on the fixed penalty notice regime and all the potential injustice that flows from that. And then we get on to Amendment number 18, which is the issue of how we define a pedicab. And this amendment would ensure that the define a power-assisted pedicab. These are pedicabs which are not just driven by human effort, but are also assisted with a battery. But they would, a power-assisted pedicab would be defined as a pedicab which conforms to the electrically assisted pedal cycles regulations 1983, thereby securing some consistency across this regime. And as you will know, Sir Roger, a power-assisted pedal cycle under those regulations is not allowed to go more than 15.5 miles per hour. Although apparently quite a lot of them do, and I've even seen cyclists going a lot faster than 15.5 miles an hour. But the Transport for London has it in mind in these draft regulations to require pedicab operators to install equipment which would be effectively a speed limiter, which would prevent the pedicabs being able to go faster than 15.5 miles per hour. And that, in a sense, must reinforce the case for saying that they should be regarded as those electrically assisted pedicabs should be regarded as electrically assisted cycles rather than as other sorts of powered vehicles, because there is in law a clear distinction between a vehicle that is subject to those the power assisted, the electrically assisted pedal cycle regulations, and those which are not, which could be regarded as ordinary motor vehicles. And the significance of the difference between defining a pedicab as a cycle as against a motor vehicle is that it has big implications on the third-party liabilities for insurance, because one of the biggest constraints upon pedicab operators is the cost of insurance. Quite rightly, the regulations will require insurance, but it's important that the regulations should be drafted in such a way as to make it easier for the costs of that insurance to be less penal than it might otherwise be if pedicabs were defined as an equivalent to an ordinary vehicle. I've already referred to Amendment 19, and Amendment 3 was an alternative to that, which is less preferable compared with Amendment 19. And then we come to Amendment 10, which clarifies in Clause 7 what is not clear at the moment, and that is that the Secretary of State's guidance to Transport for London should encompass the making of the regulations as well as the exercise of the functions under those regulations. And you will appreciate the difference between those two propositions, Sir Roger. And I look forward to hearing from the Minister as to what the government is going to do to reassure us that the guidance issued is going to cover the making of the regulations rather than just the exercise of functions under them. And then we come to what I think, again, is an important point, which goes back to the issue of what the objectives of this legislation are. This is Amendment 11. Chris Smallwood, who is the spokesman for and on behalf of the London Pedicab Operators Association, has written to me to express his support for the amendments I've been putting forward, and he suggested a number himself. And he said that he's had introductory meetings with officials from TfL, and he names them. I won't repeat their names in the House. But he says, and I quote, "A concern was that when questioned about the objectives that TfL's regulations are seeking to achieve, these officials talked only about the safety of pedicab drivers and other road users, which of course is a very important objective and is reflected in our proposed amendment on the objectives for the regulations. However, they seemed reluctant to acknowledge that a well-regulated pedicab sector could provide health, environmental and other benefits, and that securing those benefits should also be an objective." And he says, "It's not essential that this should be written into the bill itself if the government states that these objectives be written into their guidance to Transport for London." So I hope that the Minister, in responding to this, will be able to assure us that those objectives will be written into their guidance to Transport for London, because it appears from what's been being said between Transport for London officials and representatives from Cycling UK and the London Pedicabs Operators Association that that is not common ground at the moment, which it should be. So I hope that that Amendment 11, which sets out the issues to which the Secretary of State must have regard when in preparing the guidance, I hope that that is a helpful and constructive contribution. Amendment 5 repeats the point made earlier about the need to consult the London Pedicab Operators Association, Cycling UK, and whoever else is thought appropriate. Then we come on to Amendment 616, which, linked with Amendment 15, would define a civil enforcement officer as having the same meaning as is given in Section 76 of the Traffic Management Act 2004. And again, in a definition, Amendment 13 would insert that a traffic authority has the same meaning as in Section 121A, 1A and 2 of the Road Traffic Regulation 1984. So, and then we come to the new clauses and amendments put forward by other people in this House, and I look forward to hearing their contributions. I fear, however, that the collective consequence of those amendments will be to make it even easier for pedicabs to be legislated out of existence, rather than facilitating which is what I want, which is a positive regime where pedicabs are welcomed and encouraged and enabled to contribute to the life of London, and at the same time we as Conservatives are supporting and seem to be supporting the hard-working small businesses which are involved in this perfectly legitimate activity. So good luck to all those people who wish to promote the cause of pedicabs, not just in London but across the country, and hopefully in due course the government will be able to ensure that its desire for pedicabs to become a much more widespread means of transport in other places where they are not currently used, despite the efforts of a few entrepreneurs. I hope that the government will be able to introduce appropriate regulations to extend the pedicab regime beyond London, so that it's not just London but the United Kingdom, which is prided across the world as having this very important form of transport. So, Sir Nigel, can I say that it's a pleasure to be here speaking with you in the chair, and but having said that, I'm very grateful to Sir Roger for not having interrupted me once during the time that I've been speaking. And I hope that that is an indication of the genuine goodwill that there is across the House about the importance of this issue and how we need to get to grips with it and resolve it amicably, because this is a subject that's been going on for more than 20 years. As I mentioned during the second reading, it could have been dealt with in, I think, the 2005 private legislation which was brought forward by London authorities. It was never implemented because there's always been this conflict between those in London who want to legislate these pedicabs out of existence and those who wish to have a proper licensed regime with good, effective and proportionate regulation. So on that basis, I beg to move my amendment.
Thank you very much. The question is that Amendment 9 be made. Anybody standing to speak? Nobody standing to speak? Are we coming to the front benches? Shadow Minister.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to speak in my inaugural committee of the whole House on behalf of the opposition. As we set out in the second reading, Labour is clear that this bill can help to sustain a thriving pedicab industry in London that is also safe and trusted by its customers, and we support its progress today. There are two areas, however, where Labour believes the bill can be improved: on pedicab infrastructure and on the crucial safeguard of requiring enhanced disclosure and barring service checks for pedicab drivers. On the first, Amendment 8, tabled in my name and in the names of my frontbench colleagues, would enable Transport for London to use pedicab licence fees for investment in pedicab infrastructure in London. Mr. Chair, amongst issues of passenger safety and unregulated fare charging, one of the biggest issues presented by unregulated pedicabs is the nuisance of operators blocking pavements and roads as they ply for trade. The Heart of London Business Alliance, which represents over 600 businesses across London's West End, are clear that they find pedicabs frequently block pavements and roads outside of many of their members' premises. This can cause chaos at busy periods, such as when there are many hundreds of people filing out into the street after a West End show. Amendment 8 would enable Transport for London to use fees levied from pedicab licences to invest in infrastructure that supports the industry. This infrastructure could include designated pedicab ranks in certain areas designed to relieve the nuisance of blocked pavements by giving operators a specific area to pick up customers. In their potential licensing framework, TfL have already set out that they will consult with stakeholders on the provision for pedicab stands, and I do hope that the Heart of London Business Alliance, along with other associations and bodies such as the London Pedicab Operators Association, can feed into these discussions.
I thank my honourable friend for making a good closing speech on why this regulation is important. Does he agree and share my view with the honourable lady from Cities in Westminster that this bill strikes the right balance between allowing a sustainable and supportive pedicab industry to develop and giving Transport for London powers it needs to ensure that the sector runs safely?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention. I agree with my honourable friend. I just feel that there could be some extra, which we've obviously included in our amendments, in terms of enhanced disclosures. In the potential licensing framework, TfL have already set out that it will consult with stakeholders, as I said, and I do hope that that will include the London Pedicab Operators Association. Of course, it is vital that when fees are set at a level to enable investment, it remains proportionate. We are trying to provide for a prosperous pedicab industry after all, so we must ensure fees are not prohibitively unaffordable. Which is why Amendment 8 amends Clause 2, subsection 4, which already provides for TfL to set fees at a level that enables the recovery of costs incurred for administering the licensing scheme. Licensing fees being set on a cost recovery basis is fair and proportionate. This amendment simply grants TfL a degree of flexibility, whilst acknowledging the benefits that investment in pedicab infrastructure can have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My honourable friend is making an excellent speech, and he's quite clearly setting out the importance of the right balance here. Does he agree with me that there may be lessons that could be learned for other towns and cities around the country from this work in London, and that indeed this may generate a great deal of local jobs if the pedicab industry, or indeed other delivery by bicycle, is encouraged in a sensitive way around the country, and indeed remove traffic fumes and other menaces from the public realm?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I think he makes a very important point, and I'm sure that during the consultation from TfL that they will hopefully engage with those other organisations to ensure maximum benefit. Labour's priority, after all, is to grant TfL the flexibility they need to implement a regulatory regime that promotes safety whilst also allowing regulated pedicab industry in London to flourish. Naturally, infrastructure, such as pedicab stands, would be competing against many different demands for the use of central London's curbsides, and it will remain TfL's responsibility to work with local authorities on where infrastructure can be viably located. Now, some honourable friends may disagree that this bill is an appropriate place to discuss pedicab infrastructure, but on the contrary, Labour believes that the conduct of pedicab drivers and the safety of the public are undeniably linked to TfL's ability to fund and make provision for infrastructure that supports a regulated pedicab industry. Amendment 8 clarifies one potential revenue stream for the provision of this infrastructure, and I do hope that the Government considers its merits carefully. Turning now to new clause 1, 2 and 3, tabled in my name and in the names of my front bench colleagues. All three of these new clauses concern the safety of children and vulnerable adults using pedicabs. Mr Chair, as we've heard at second reading and as reported widely in the media and by numerous stakeholders, misconduct by pedicab operators arguably provides the strongest case for the desperate need to regulate this industry. Blocking streets and pavements, reckless driving and noise nuisance are all important areas that regulation will address, but they pale in comparison to the vital responsibility that we have to ensure that TfL have the powers to ensure public safety effectively. As TfL's proposed licensing framework sets out, this emphasis on safety will be their guiding principle for pedicab regulations. Front and centre of this is eligibility requirements for operators and drivers. TfL have set out a raft of proposed licensing requirements, including alignment of visa status requirements with taxi and private hire licensing, English proficiency and highway code, and hazard perception awareness. This, of course, is welcome, but TfL are also clear that we would like to see compulsory enhanced disclosure and borrowing service checks from pedicab drivers, again in line with the taxi and private hire requirements. This should be a vital component in ensuring the safety of pedicab customers. But TfL have explicitly stated in their draft licensing framework on page 5 that this would require changes in legislation. Because whilst Clause 2, subsection 6A of the bill empowers TfL to regulate on licensing eligibility, enhanced DBS checks may not form part of these requirements if TfL do not have the right powers. These difficulties were raised in the other place and were acknowledged by the Lord Minister himself. The draft licensing framework also clearly makes a distinction between a basic DBS check and enhanced DBS checks, and explicitly states that enhanced DBS checks for pedicab drivers would be TfL's preference. For the benefit of colleagues, an enhanced DBS check may also show information held by local police forces on individuals. This intelligence may prove vital when making decisions to award a licence to a pedicab driver, and it is absolutely right that TfL should be able to require enhanced checks. Mr Chair, whilst enhanced DBS checks are not a panacea, they are clearly an important component of through eligibility requirements. Labour recognises the need to balance getting this bill onto the statute book swiftly and the need to ensure the bill conveys sufficient powers to TfL so that they can truly make pedicabs a trusted and safe mode of transport in London. But if TfL do not have the right powers to vet pedicab drivers accordingly, with enhanced DBS checks, this would threaten their ability to truly implement a watershed regulatory framework. Labour's new Clause 1 would add this bill, upon royal assent, to the list of existing taxi and private hire vehicle legislation under Section 177 of the Policing and Crime Act of 2017. As colleagues may be aware, Section 177 powers the Secretary of State to issue statutory guidance on how licensing authorities can ensure the safeguarding of children and vulnerable adults. Including pedicabs in this list of licensed activities covered by the statutory guidance would be a crucial step for a safer pedicab industry. Labour's new Clause 2 was designed to build on new Clause 1, turning the Secretary of State's power to issue statutory guidance into TfL into a duty. And crucially, under subsection 2 of new Clause 2, this guidance would also include a requirement for enhanced disclosure and borrowing service checks to be a condition of a licence. In concert with new Clause 1, these two clauses would equip TfL with the powers they need to properly regulate in the name of safety by including enhanced DBS checks as a baseline standard for driver eligibility. Finally, Mr Chair, Labour's new Clause 3 inserts onto the face of the bill the power for TfL to make enhanced DBS checks as a condition of licence to operate a pedicab and provides for the Secretary of State to amend the relevant secondary legislation to facilitate this. It's important to emphasise once again that these powers that Transport for London have explicitly said that they want to utilise. If we're to truly place safety at the heart of these regulations, TfL must have the power to mandate an enhanced DBS check for all pedicab drivers, and these three new clauses provide a way forward to achieve that. However, Mr Chair, in the spirit of getting this bill onto the statute book as urgently as possible, if it is clear that these amendments do not have the support of the House, I am content to not push these amendments to a vote. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Chair. I wish to address all particular amendments that have been put down by all particular colleagues. I'm conscious that the Honourable Lady for the Liberal Dems is not present, but I'll deal with her matters, which are 21, 6 and 7, very briefly. In respect of her Amendment 21, the consultation will happen as she seeks. In respect of her Amendment 6, the Clause 2.7 of the bill addresses the concerns that she has on that. And in relation to number 7 of her amendments, Clause 7.6, I believe, covers that. My honourable friend for the party opposite has put forward a number of specific amendments, and he and I have discussed this both on the previous occasion and prior to today, and I want to try and address a couple of the points. They are made in the right possible way, or in the right spirit, and in conscious of what was discussed in the other place. If I can address a couple of the key points. In relation to new Clause 1, which he proposes, we believe that is not necessary, given that Clause 7.2 already achieves the policy intention by specifying that Secretary of State's guidance may include guidance about TfL's functions. And the key point, of course, is that 7.2, we believe, addresses the overarching themes. The crucial point that he does wish to make is in respect to DB checks, and I acknowledge that particular point. Clearly, there is the primary checks that we've discussed on repeat occasions in the past, but the instructions that I strongly have is that the appropriate way to deal with these matters is to make amendments to the exception orders. These are the Police Act of 1997, the Criminal Records Regulations of 2002, that's a negative procedure, and the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act 1974, Exceptions Order of 1975, that's an affirmative procedure. I can tell the House that the Home Office and particularly the Minister of Justice are currently considering a range of proposals for changes to such eligibility, and we were looking to bring forward a consolidated package of changes in due course. I'm not able to do that at this particular stage, nor do I feel that this bill is the right venue to do that, but his point is well noted, taken on board, and is very much live in respect of the MOJ's considerations. Can I, before I turn to my honourable friend from Christchurch, who, in his typical way, did a heartfelt speech setting out his genuine concerns and his genuine desire to ensure that there is a pedicab business on an ongoing basis post-regulation. Can I welcome his concern on that point? And as a strong Conservative, I want to see exactly the same as him. All right? And I want to put that on record. I want to make it very clear that we want 1,000 flowers to bloom, and we want a situation that pedicabs will continue on a long-term basis. I want to briefly put on record, and I know that there is a desire to trade who said what over the last few years, but I do briefly want to put on the record some of the comments by some of the key organisations who are engaged here. Clearly, the London Pedicab Operators Association, the LPOA, have made a variety of comments down the years. They, on the 7th of November 2023, one of the spokesmen, Mr. Schroeder, stated, "It's handy for us to have legislation and rules and regulations for the operators, which includes insurers. We've been competing against operators who don't follow any rules, who can do what they want, and that makes it difficult. It's a shame that they don't involve the industry in making decisions, because then it's take it or leave it. Then mention was made of Mr. Smallwood, and we are optimistic, he stated in August 2022, that probably for the first time all parties have a determination to finally establish a bespoke regulatory regime for pedicabs which extends throughout the country. This is a positive and exciting opportunity, and perhaps a singular chance in the foreseeable future to resolve this long-standing issue. And he added, and I think this is relevant to consideration of whether we are creating a bespoke arrangement to allow an organisation to continue in a safely regulated way. He said, regulations across Europe and the USA are simple, straightforward and effective, so clearly it is possible to regulate pedicabs and at the same time allow the industry to flourish. Of course I will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm very grateful for the Minister giving way. Briefly, would he perhaps reflect on the benefits of exactly this regulatory approach being brought forward to look at other comparable new emerging forms of transport, particularly electric bikes and scooters, where there's a great deal of concern from many constituents of mine and many other colleagues that there needs to be a sensible approach to these new vehicles, which both encourages use of more modest, more environmentally friendly transport, but also keeps them off pavements and avoids people being scared to walk down the street. Would he perhaps commit to looking into that important matter as well?
So he tempts me to go somewhat beyond the bill, and I'm going to try and address that in a couple of ways, which is clearly the Department for Transport has to look at all types of vehicles in whatever shape or form who utilise the roads or cycles and various types of scooters and the like. It is complex legislation, as we are showing when just dealing with the simple issue of pedicabs alone. However, it is unquestionably the case, and I speak as the Minister who answers for accessibility issues, that it cannot be the situation in a long term, and I accept that there is an ongoing research project effectively going on in respect of these particular alternative vehicles, but it cannot be the case long term, in my humble opinion, that we have an unregulated system where vehicles can be deposited on the pavement, which particularly for those who have accessibility or who are blind or have other disability issues are unquestionably compromised by that. There has to be regulation going forward. I am very, very keen to see that. But again, slightly touching on the point that my honourable friend made, there has to be a way to get what is the right form of regulation to allow this to go ahead. To be fair to successive mayors of London, having what are sometimes called Boris bikes or sometimes called other types of bikes with a docking station has been exceptionally successful at getting people out of a bus or a car, and it is the right thing to do. So I'm utterly on board with what he says. Clearly, it is for all parties to look at their transport manifestos, but it unquestionably would be my view as a very junior and very humble minister that we need to consider that. Can I just address a couple of final quick points? The Ben Knowles of Pedal Me stated, pedicabs have been undermined by the business models under which they are run, by the lack of regulation. So I'm excited to see this regulation coming in, because I think it will help boost standards across the industry and turn it into the reputable, useful service it always should have been. Now, to assist my honourable friend for Christchurch and all colleagues, I ask that that TfL update and improve and enhance their regulations in terms of the draft regulations. And I want to just try and address that in brief, if I may, because I don't think I've ever come across a bill which is so brief, which has so detailed draft regulations for pre-scrutiny. I've done this job 14 years, I have never seen such copious detail. And of course I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way on that point. I think he's making an absolute important point, and I think it's very clear that I have never always seen eye to eye with this current mayor. But on the regulation of pedicabs, we are absolutely at one. And I know from the mayor's transport strategy that he wants to encourage more cycling, more green transport, which pedicabs are. So the last thing that the Mayor of London wants to do is eradicate pedicabs. And I think the fact that they've put together these draft guidelines and have worked very closely with the Department of Transport is clear they want this regime to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think, can I put on record my agreement with her the Department for Transport and the TfL have worked very close to progress this. There is a desperate desire to get regulation ongoing so that this properly regulated business go forward. And to be fair, they've actually put it in writing. And I just want to put on record very briefly the comment at literally paragraph 2, which states, "We recognise the need for regulations to not only improve safety but to minimise the other associated negative impact pedicabs have on London, from congestion on streets and pavements to loud music causing public nuisance or disproportionate fares, undermining London's reputation as a global tourist hub." They then go on, however. "Once this behaviour is effectively managed through a regulatory regime, we believe there are a number of benefits pedicabs may have, especially in central areas where these services could offer a green, safe and space-efficient option." I don't think they could have been any more clearer about their intent to have a regulatory regime, but also a safe regime. Briefly.
I thank the Minister for making those points, and again to the Honourable Member for Cities and Westminster. And I think it's fitting that as we are coming to the last few debates in the Chamber and coming up to Easter, I think this bill has been resurrected a number of, maybe 5 times. We're nearly there, and it's quite fitting that we're coming there. In terms of what the Minister just outlined there, I think, does he agree with me that there is cross-party support in seeing a pedicab industry that works, seeing a pedicab industry that supports customers, supports those drivers, and one that can flourish? And unfortunately, the current situation which we have, it's causing tension, so hence why we need this regulation passed quickly.
And it is unquestionably the case, I think there is cross-party support for this, and even my honourable friend, who has got understandable concerns, is supportive of a light touch regulation on this particular ongoing basis. So can I just address a couple of extra quick points, if I may? It is on the record this bill does not require a statement on Section 13C of the EU Withdrawal Act. That is good news. Secondly, in respect of my Amendment 20, I will be subsequently moving that. Thirdly, in respect of my honourable friend's amendments, I regret I'm going to disappoint him that I'm not in agreement with his amendments. I'm going to deal with them briefly. I believe with respect that Amendment 9 is covered by Clause 7.5. Amendment 1 is covered by Clause 1.3, which requires a statutory public consultation. And obviously you have the updated and published February 24 guidance. Amendment 2, these bodies will be consulted. No reasonable consultation could possibly go ahead without them being involved. Amendment 4, I believe, is dealt with by Clause 7. Amendment 12 is the same issue as raised by the Honourable Lady for Twickenham. The Amendment 17 is unquestionably this bill is for pedicab transporting passengers. Amendment 14, I believe, is dealt with by Clause 3.5. Amendment 15 is dealt with by, this is what would happen in practice, but it's dealt with Clause 3.6. Amendment 18 is dealt with by Clause 1.2, defines pedicabs as pedal cycles or power-assisted pedal cycles. The term power-assisted captures this particular point and is broader than electrically assisted. Clauses 3 and 19 that he's put forward, I believe, have been dealt with previously, but clearly the Secretary of State must have the power to assess this process once the bill has been progressed. Number 10 is guidance should not circumvent consultation and regulation, and I believe 11 is dealt with by Regulation 7.1. In the circumstances of the case, briefly.
I'm very grateful to the Minister. Will he address this specific point about the ability of pedicabs to be able to continue to ply for hire? Will he assure me that under no circumstances will the government allow Transport for London to prevent pedicabs from being able to apply for hire?
Well, I think this is a matter that should be dealt with great respect through the upcoming consultation, and there couldn't be any clearer than the introduction to said consultation that they wish pedicabs to continue. Now, it is unquestionably the case that they are going to have to manage the numbers of pedicabs that there are, but with great respect, I think that is dealt with both in the introduction and in the subsequent matters. And after all, that is the point of a consultation. there should be an open consultation discussing this with all particular individuals who are relevant to this. So in those circumstances, and with due respect, Mr Deputy Chairman, I would invite all colleagues to withdraw their amendments and commend this bill to the House.
Thank you very much. Sir Christopher Chope, what would you like to do?
May I briefly respond? May I thank the Minister and everybody who's participated in this debate. And can I, on the very last point about the applying for hire, can I say, well, it seems as though Transport for London is actively contemplating a situation in which no pedicabs will be able to apply for hire. And it says, for example, in paragraph, in page 8 of this consultation, if following consultation, pedicabs are allowed to continue to apply for hire, which envisages a situation in which they might not be allowed to apply for hire, and unless they can apply for hire, then in my view, it's the end of pedicabs as we know it. But the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating on this. I've seen over the years in London how we had a Greater London Council which interfered and acted against the wishes of the people. We've now seen Transport for London alienating a lot of people over the ULEZ extension and its proliferation of 20-mile-an-hour limits. And we must trust Transport for London, I suppose, to ensure that what they say they're going to do is they actually do. But I'm grateful to the Minister for pointing out that he and I are ad idem in our determination to ensure that there is a vibrant and lively continuing pedicab industry within London. And Sir Nigel, in those circumstances, I'm going to withdraw my amendments because I don't think there's any need to take the matter any further. But I do look forward to the consultations which will flow on those regulations.
Thank you very much. And just for the record, Sir Roger told me you were gloriously within order throughout speaking to the amendments. Is it your pleasure that Amendment 9 be withdrawn? Aye. Amendment by leave withdrawn. With the leave of the House, I will now put the question that clauses 1 to 6 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 1 to 6 stand part of the bill. May I have say aye? Aye. No. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sir Christopher has indicated he wishes to withdraw Amendment 19 to Clause 7. Is it your pleasure that Amendment 19 to Clause 7 be withdrawn? Aye. Pleasure withdrawn. With the leave of the House, I will now put question that Clauses 7 to 10 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clauses 7 to 10 stand part of the bill. May I say aye? Aye. No. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to Amendment 20 to Clause 11. Minister to move formally. Is that Amendment 20 be made? Let me say aye. Aye. No, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that Clause 11 stand part of, as amended, stand part of the bill. May I say aye? Aye. On the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. Here. Order. Whip to report.
I beg to report that the committee has gone through the bill and directed me to report on the same with an amendment.
Thank you. Under the order of the House of the 28th of February, we now proceed directly to consideration. No amendments on consideration. We now come to third reading.
Now.
Minister to move third reading.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time. I'd like to place on record my gratitude to colleagues and particularly my honourable friend for City of Westminster, who has fought nobly to bring forward this vital piece of legislation to the good burghers of London on an ongoing basis, through thick and thin, through private members' bill, through fair winds and foul, and she has done a phenomenal job. It is rightly said that this is a cross-party bill. I want to put my thanks to both the Transport for London, the work they have done working with the Department of Transport, my officials who have done a fantastic job taking this forward. It is right that I mention some of the other people, the honourable friend for Sutton and Cheam, who tried to bring this legislation legislation previously, but fundamentally this is something that has been overdue for well over 20 years. It is an important but discreet piece of legislation, and I commend it to the House.
The question is that the bill be now read the third time. Shadow Minister, Simon Lightwood.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'll keep my remarks brief. This is, of course, the penultimate main business of the day before the Easter recess, and far be it from me to delay colleagues returning to their constituencies. I'm grateful for all honourable members who have participated in this bill's progress, of course, particularly the member for Cities in London and Westminster. I'm also grateful for the work of colleagues in the other place. Thanks to their hard work, the bill came to us in a much improved state, specifically the work to add the provision for the regulation on noise nuisance and their efforts to pressure the government into changing their approach and requiring parliamentary approval, thereby ensuring these powers are fully devolved to Transport for London, is commendable. Mr Deputy Speaker, as I set out at second reading and just now in committee, Labour supports this bill. For years, there have been calls for the government to take action to grant Transport for London the powers they need to regulate this industry. So whilst Labour welcomes this bill, that will finally become law and a regulated pedicab industry in London will soon emerge, it has taken far too long to get here. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, I must repeat at this point, as I emphasised at second reading, that whilst there is no doubt that this bill is hugely welcome to London's West End and a handful of other London areas, these measures should have been introduced as part of a far wider transport bill, because elsewhere in transport policy there remains desperate need for major transport reform, particularly on e-bikes and e-scooters, but the government continues to duck this responsibility and has refused to use this opportunity to bring forward a long-promised and long-delayed transport bill. Mr Deputy Speaker, I've been listening carefully to the arguments made by the Minister, and I welcome that the government may be content that TfL can mandate enhanced DBS checks for pedicabs under current private hire vehicle legislation. It's regrettable, of course, that new clauses 1, 2 and 3 amendments to the bill, all pertaining to the safeguarding of vulnerable adults and children, were not taken forward today. TfL themselves have indicated throughout their draft licensing framework that passenger safety will be their guiding principle and that they are keen to incorporate enhanced DBS checks into licensing conditions under Clause 2, Section 6A, yet believe they currently do not have the powers to do so. Each of Labour's new clauses offered a different way forward to incorporating enhanced DBS checks into TfL's regulations. And whilst it's disappointing that the government has not taken these amendments forward, Labour welcomes the opportunity presented by tabling these amendments to facilitate a discussion on the importance of TfL having the powers to integrate enhanced DBS checks into their licensing regime. And I welcome the exploration of alternative means as described by the Minister to achieve the same objectives. In light of this, I gently ask the Minister whether he will meet with me at his earliest convenience to discuss this issue further and identify ways we can work together on a cross-party basis to grant TfL the powers they need to keep passengers safe. Mr Deputy Speaker, overall this bill is welcome, if not long overdue. A great addition to the statute books. I would like to once again thank all honourable members and lords in the other place for their involvement, in addition to the clerks and stakeholders who have helped us to scrutinise this bill effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Florence Eshalomi.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it's great to see that we are making progress on this bill, and I just want to start by congratulating my constituency neighbour, the Honourable Member for Cities in Westminster, in putting forward this bill to Parliament, and I really do congratulate her on her persistence in getting this hard, long-awaited bill to the last remaining stages. Like the Honourable Member for Cities in Westminster and my frontbench colleagues and the Mayor of London, I've long supported this bill and as a means to give Transport for London the real power to regulate our pedicabs. I will keep my remarks short, but like many others have highlighted throughout the course of this debate, this bill it highlights a serious problem of the unregulated regime around pedicabs in my Vauxhall constituency and other parts of London. And my intention and my support for this bill does not come from a place of wanting to see pedicabs banned in all forms on our streets for good. Instead, like everybody else, I want to see a properly regulated industry that works for everybody. Unfortunately, what we've currently got is one that creates tensions. It's of businesses seeing their pavements blocked and consumers discouraged. It's of residents being disrupted by excessive loud music during unsociable hours. It's of passengers facing hiked and even extortionate fees for really short journeys. And most importantly, it's about the drivers themselves being forced to work in dangerous conditions and being undercut by those who cut corners in maintenance. And the bill that we've got before us here, with the support from the Department for Transport, the Mayor for London, and cross-party councils across London, strikes a right balance in allowing that sustainable and supported pedicabs industry to develop and to flourish. We've waited far too long for this bill to be passed in this House, and whilst we've been waiting, we see people continuing to be ripped off. We see consumers and visitors being deterred by coming to the heart of London. We want more tourists to come, bring in their trade, bring their money, bring their families. But when they have a bad experience, that spreads faster than a good experience. So it's really important that we work together, continue to work in that spirit of cross-party collaboration and making sure we put an end to this unregulated practice and get this bill on the statute book.
Nickie Aiken.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I can't quite believe that we're here, to be honest. You have spent many a Friday in that chair listening to me make the argument as why we need pedicab regulation. And it has never been about eradicating pedicabs. It has always been about making them safer for the tourists who use them, for the drivers that drive them, and making it a much more pleasant place to live in Westminster and to work and have a business in Westminster. People never really actually appreciate that in the West End of London, there are thousands of people living in social housing, whether it's in Soho, whether it's in Fitzrovia, Covent Garden or Marylebone. And these people have no choice where they live. They are given a home in a social housing block, whether it's via the council or whether it's via a housing association, and they haven't got the ability to move. And they have to often live with horrendous experiences that a minority of pedicabs ply. The loud music for hours and hours on end during early hours. And the fact that tourists have been ripped off. And we have got so many examples. And we have got to continue to grow the London economy, especially the central London economy, which has taken such a battering following COVID and then the energy crisis. And we need to ensure that when tourists come here, they have a fantastic time. And I personally believe, I fully believe that having a regime, a licensing scheme for pedicabs will improve the offer. It will ensure that people do enjoy it and that they do have a special time in London. So I am absolutely delighted that we have, after 4 private members' bills, that the government accepted that we do need to do this. And I would like to reiterate my thanks to the people in number 10, Will Tanner and James Nation, for the support they gave me, and also for the Prime Minister, who was fully behind this. And my greatest thanks goes to the Minister, my honourable friend for Hexham, who has really worked with me on this. I thank him so much. And also the front bench, who I know has been supporting this, and my dear friend, the member for Vauxhall, who, people talk about having friendships in the chamber, and I am so proud to have her as a friend. I'd also like to thank all the organisations across the West End, the Soho Society, the Marylebone Association and others who have been behind me all the way in this. And I honestly do believe that this will make a huge difference. So thank you again, and for the people of the West End, this is going to make a huge difference.
Mr Clifford at Chope.
Mr Deputy Speaker, may I also add my thanks to people involved in this issue, and particularly I'm grateful to my honourable friend for the way in which she has been taking forward the interests of her constituents, and I'm disappointed in the sense that she's decided to throw in the towel and not stand again at the next general election. And perhaps in her retirement from this House, she will be able to become a licensed pedicab driver herself. Nickie thereby be able to use her knowledge and experience, and she certainly won't have much difficulty in being able to pass the regulatory requirement of knowing the location exactly of central London and how to get around it. But can I also thank other organisations, the London Pedicab Operators Association and Cycling UK, both of which organisations have been helping me in putting questions about this bill, because I think it's very important in legislation like this that awkward questions are put to those who are promoting it. And it's been disappointing to me in a sense that quite a lot of other members who are London members have not actually been questioning any of this. And I think the interchange that we've had today between myself and the Minister should help concentrate minds on making sure that the regulations, when they're finally brought forward, do exactly what we want them to do, and that we are able to have a thriving pedicab activities and industry in this country, right across the country rather than just in London, as indeed, as we've heard, there is already on the continent and in North America. As somebody who started off soon after I was elected a long time ago, taking my two children then on a tandem trailer, on our own tandem, so my wife and I on a tandem and the two children on a tandem trailer, my commitment to cycling knows no bounds really, and cannot be questioned. And I hope that we will be, on the basis of this legislation, be able to reinforce the strong case for cycling and encourage more people to take the strain and actually allow others to be on their cycles. And an increasing number of parents are now taking their children to school and on outings on the back of their bikes, and good on them for doing it. So may I say that it may have taken 20 years to get here, but reforming legislation is an iterative process, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And 20-odd years ago, the London Taxi Drivers Association was completely against the idea of pedicabs. I hope that now we will find that they will tolerate and indeed accept pedicabs, and perhaps we can encourage taxi organisations outside London to welcome this very valuable alternative form of transport.
Shaun Billy.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'll be a bit brief because I hadn't actually intended to speak. But I just wish to put on record, having followed this debate, and particularly committee stage and now, my thanks to my honourable, and I say this with such heartfelt meaning, my honourable friend from cities of London and Westminster, who has just gone to show the power of this place. And when we talk about coming to this place and making tangible change, what has happened today, along with the work that she's done, I must commend as well with the member for Vauxhall, in bringing forward this legislation, just goes to show that despite the bandying around, despite sometimes the argy-bargy that happens, we can truly make real change in this place. And I must say, and put on record as well, how sad I am and how much of a loss it will be to lose my honourable friend from this place. She is truly, without doubt, the best of this place, and if I may say, the best of our party as well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it is going to be a real loss when we lose her. I want to say how proud I am to have watched her over the last 4 years really take this through in such a way, and I think it is such a monument and a legacy to her that she's been able to do this for her constituents in such a way. And I would just simply say to her, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I think we would all agree across this House, she should be so proud of what she's done today, because she's followed through on that. She's won for her constituents, and I think she's done what all of us in this place set out to do. And I think for that, her constituents in the cities of London and Westminster will be proud of her, but also grateful as well. And on that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'll conclude my remarks.
Well, we're all going to miss you, Nickie. Although, you know, clearly I'm going to come out to Dubai and stay for a few weeks, but... Here we go. The question is that the bill be now read the third time. Has been that, say aye? Aye. No, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Congratulations.